Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar hosted by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name is Victor Trinidad with NCPMI. This webinar is part of the Digging into Data webinar series. Today's topic is Introduction to the Classroom Coaching Log, presented by Jolina Farrow and Denise Perez Binder. Thank you very much and welcome.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Jolina Farrow, and I'm going to be starting this presentation, the webinar, maybe. There we go. Okay. All right. So today is part of the Digging into Data webinar series, and we're going to be talking about why we use data and what you can do with data, but we're going to be talking about it in reference to the coaching log, right? So you may have heard some of the other digging into data sessions, but we're going to make those same kinds of points, just talking about the coaching log. Then we're going to describe the classroom coaching log, and then we're going to do just a really kind of simple example so you can see what kind of data you get from the coaching log and how you might use it to make coaching decisions. Okay, so lots of times when I go into a classroom or I go into a program, I hear this. Data are just, I can't do it because it's just adding more to my plate and I can't do any more than I'm already doing. But the data are not meant to add more to your plate. Data are about making sure that, well, I like this quote that, or this sentence, that you have the right thing on your plate so that you're not doing things that don't make a difference. So data tell you when you are being effective, and so you can be more efficient with your coaching. All right, so and data are more than required reporting. Another thing that happens to me when I go into classrooms or into programs is that people are collecting data, but it goes off to an evaluator somewhere, or it goes off to the district office or something. And the people who are actually collecting the data, for example, in this case, the coaching log, the coaches don't get to see the data, but, and that's required reporting for an evaluation, which makes sense. But data are for the coach, especially the coaching log, or data are for the coach to use, to be able to be more effective and to be more efficient in their reporting. Data are also not a gotcha or a punishment. Hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Data are about, because data are used by the evaluators and data are used by the leadership team, even the coaching log data, so that they can figure out, it's figuring out, you know, do we have enough coaches? Are we having our coaches spend enough time with the teachers? And for the coach, it's kind of the same thing. Am I spending enough time? Am I doing the things that I need to be doing with the teachers? So it's not about gotcha. It's about how can I be a better coach? Okay, so we always start off with some basic assumptions about data that we'd like our programs to start off with, those basic assumptions, or to integrate those basic assumptions as well. And the first thing we start off with is that there's a clear vision. What is it that you want to have happen in your program? As a coach, what is it that you want to have happen in your coaching? And so that means that you've identified outcomes. So I want to know as a coach that I'm going in and working with a teacher, and that teacher's practices are improving, that the teacher is adding practices to what they're doing, that the outcome is then that the teacher is practicing at a higher rate of implementation. All right, so you start off with your vision and your plan, and then you've identified your outcome and that you measure that outcome. So that's part of the basic assumption for data decision making, is that you're measuring your outcome, but you're also measuring, if I said I was going to work with this teacher twice a month, am I working with this teacher twice a month? am I implementing the strategies that I said I was going to implement with this teacher? Are we identifying action plan goals? So it's fidelity. Am I doing what I said I would do? And the outcomes, is the teacher's behavior changing? Is the teacher becoming more fluent in their practices? All right, so you have these data, you have this idea, these assumptions that you're measuring, but then you need to also summarize and use the data so that if you have just bunches of data all over, if you have coaching logs that are just checked and nobody is really summarizing that information and using that information, then you're not getting what you need out of it. So when we start talking about the coaching log, we'll also be talking about, I have data, so I'm looking at the data, I'm thinking about the data, and I'm actually making an action plan to change what I do so that the data show me that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and that I'm making a difference. So you're using that data. And the assumption when you're making a database decision is that you're using that data in some way. You're not just sending it off somewhere. And the final thing is that data collection and analysis are an ongoing thing. So you don't do it at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year, that you're collecting coaching log data, for example, every time you go out coaching, because it will help you become a more efficient coach. It will help you focus your practices and your strategies in the way that they need to be focused. So it's ongoing. It's not kind of a one-off, or at the end of the year, I go back and look at it to see what I did that year. You want to use the coaching data to change what you're doing, or to go, wow, I'm doing a really great job and I'm going to keep it the same because it is making a difference. Okay, so coaching helps you organize for an effective problem-solving conversation. So you may have seen this before. So if you have a problem and you're trying to get, then the problem might be, let's think about the coaching log. The problem might be that the teacher is at a low level of implementation of pyramid model practices in the classroom, all right? And so if you have that problem, and then you start kind of talking about it you're talking to the teacher, you're talking to other coaches, everybody has an idea, everybody has an opinion, it kind of is all over the place. You never kind of get to the solution. Uh-oh. There we go. Until you're out of time, right? The teacher is swimming in problems and she doesn't know what to do and you're out of time in solving it. But if you use data, then you can go directly to the solution. The data really points you to the solution you need because it tells you what you've been doing and it helps you figure out how you can change it. So the key to effective problem solving is to provide a visual context, data, tables, graphs, that allows everyone to follow and contribute so that people can look at what's going on and figure out what to do next. Okay, so in pyramid model goals, we've identified outcomes that programs should be working toward. And I'm sure you know, if you're doing pyramid model, you know what these outcomes are. So children improve their social emotional skills is the top one in the list. Teachers are working effectively with each child. The program is preparing children for kindergarten, and the program builds responsive relationships with each child and family. So those are our goals around the positive implementation outcomes that we want to have happen when you're implementing pyramid model. And you can see that the coach is a really big part of that. So children improve social emotional skills because teachers are teaching the children. They're using pyramid practices in the classroom. And the coach is working with the teacher to improve those teacher practices, right? Working together cooperatively with the teacher to improve those practices. The teacher works effectively with each child, and the coach is there supporting that in the teacher. The program builds responsive relationships with each child and family, and that's part of the pyramid practices. It's part of the teapot. Those are action goals that you may be coaching around. So the coach is a really big part of positive implementation outcomes. And so that the ultimate goal is fidelity of implementation, means you doing what you said you would do, that leads to outcomes for children, families, providers, and programs. Okay, Denise.
So I'm going to talk us a little bit about what the coaching log actually will present and the kinds of decisions that you can make if you're collecting data on the coaching log. So the main thing is, are we making progress with our teachers? Is the coaching implementation happening in a way that's meeting that overarching goal, or that's helping us achieve that overarching goal of changing teacher practices and affecting child outcomes? And we can learn that if we collect good data on our coaching log. The coaching log also helps us understand the infrastructure around that your program has built around professional development or coaching supports. So are we spending the right amount of time so that we can get teachers to change practices, so that we can influence those child outcomes? Do we have the right number of coaches to support the number of teachers that we have across our program or programs? Are there elements of coaching that need some support? Are there elements that we're not, strategies in our coaching supports that we haven't been utilizing? We can look at that by teacher. We can look at that across teachers, and we can figure out what it is that we're doing or not doing that may be supporting that overarching goal. So I've had lots of programs ask me lately, what is it that we can do to measure our coaches' fidelity? Are coaches doing what we said they would do? And are they doing it in the time and the pace that our leadership team said they could do it? And this is the coaching log is the thing that's going to get you there. That's going to help you get those answers and figure that out. So we want, like all of our other data tools across pyramid model, the coaching log can support the levels of implementation. So it is an implementation site or demonstration site tool. It helps you know what your coaches are doing in specific classrooms across your program, but it's also going to inform your professional development network. So your network of coaches, you can look across coaches and see if there's patterns in the way that we observe, the strategies that we use while we're observing, the strategies that we use while we're debriefing. We may need to collectively bring our coaches together and do a booster training around acceptable and possible strategies that they can use. And likewise, it will help the state leadership team inform, are we allocating enough funds to support a range of coaches that can support multiple implementation sites at a time? Do they have the FTE? Do they have the time in their schedule to visit multiple implementation sites in a day? And they can support multiple leadership teams or multiple classrooms. So the classroom coaching log will serve multiple functions if we're collecting it in the right way and we're asking the right questions. So a little introduction to the log specifically. So in pyramid model implementation, we use practice-based coaching. That's the model of coaching that we use. And so the log is built very specifically to measure the different components of practice-based coaching cycle. So we know the practice-based coaching cycle, and this is the icon or the visual at the bottom of this slide, is wrapped around the collaborative partnership. So with the log, we're going to measure how much time is spent with a particular teacher in a particular classroom during an observation, during a debrief. We can measure what kinds of strategies are used during the focused observation. So when the coach is in the classroom observing a teacher's practices, are they working towards a specific goal? And there's a set list of practices that coaches can use, and they dictate that on their log. Similarly, we can measure what practices coaches are using during their reflection and feedback with their specific teachers. So with that, we can measure, are we delivering complete practice-based coaching cycles? Do we use the same kinds of strategies during debrief with all our teachers, even though some of our teachers are reaching fidelity in implementation and some of our teachers still are struggling? Maybe we need to individualize our strategies a little bit, and we can look at that very specifically on the coaching log. But again, the coaching log is really specific to the practice-based coaching model. And so it's not going to fit if you're using a different model for coaching. It's really built to support the fidelity of implementation of this specific coaching model. So on the log, we're going to measure what strategies are most commonly being used by a coach for a specific teacher or a group of teachers. We can measure both the observation strategies that are being used and the debrief strategies that are being used. And then we can kind of ask questions about are those strategies being effective for that particular teacher? So on the NCPMI website, which is the challengingbehavior.org, you can download the coaching log, which includes a detailed list, a defined list of the observation and debrief strategies. This slide shows a list of the observation only strategies. So these are strategies that are possible for a coach to use when they're conducting a focused observation in a classroom. It doesn't mean you have to use all of them, but these are the ones that are possible. And like I said, on the website, you can download the defined list. So it gives you a definition of each of the strategies, and it gives you examples of what that might look like in application. So these are the observation strategies. And then there's also a defined list of the strategies that are possible when conducting the debriefing session with your teachers. So these look a little bit different. They are meant to happen when you're one-on-one, having conversations, reflecting with your teachers, giving feedback, receiving feedback from your teacher. These are the possible things that can happen. Again, there's a list of definitions with examples of how that might look in application that you can download and reproduce as many times as you want. One of our major suggestions is always discuss those strategies with your teacher, with the practitioner, before you just jump in and use them. So you would, as a coach, you would never go into a teacher's classroom and start videotaping things without first having an agreement with the teacher about that. Making sure that they're okay with the strategies that you plan on using, that you've discussed them ahead of time, that you've made an agreement that this is the strategies that the coaches can use and when they can use them and how they can use them, and that's mutually agreed upon. Coaches really need to be 100% organized before they step into a focused observation. You should know what cycle you're on when you step into a classroom. You should know what the action goal, what the goal statement is that your teacher is working towards. You should already know what action steps they're prepared to use during that observation. And you can take really good comprehensive notes if you're organized in that way. Those notes in turn will drive your debriefing session. And so making sure that that organization, that prepared planfulness has happened before you step into the classroom to start coaching. We think that videotaping is a really powerful coaching tool. Again, you need to go into this with an agreement, a mutual agreement from your teacher. Your teacher knows what you're going to videotape. She knows what the coach will do with the tape after they're done discussing it, and she feels comfortable, the teacher feels comfortable with the coach using that strategy in her classroom. Again, we just don't want to go into teachers' classroom and start using strategies like modeling or co-teaching without clearing that with the teacher. You don't want to take the kids' focus away from the teacher, away from the regular routine of the classroom, just because you're in there trying to coach. You really should step back and just observe the natural environment. That's going to give you the best feedback during your debrief session. And then always making sure that you're not just going through your list of strategies. Okay, I got to do this now. I got to do this now. But we're really thinking about, what does this particular teacher need? So just like we do with kids in the classroom, your coaching supports need to be individualized to support the particular needs of that teacher. And that's going to be different from teacher to teacher, from classroom to classroom. So making sure that you're using your coaching log in a way that helps you reflect on the types of strategies you used, and then the effectiveness of those. So this is the paper copy of the coaching log. The coaching log, like all the other pyramid tools, has an Excel workbook that goes with it. You can choose to use the you can choose to use the paper copy, or you can choose the Excel workbook, whatever your preferences. There's no right or wrong way to collect the data, just as long as you're collecting it in this way. So the form starts off by asking the coach to note the amount of time they were in observation. So this is going to be really important as we go through and think about the relationship, the partnership that we've built with teachers. We can go back and see, are we spending the amount of time in there that's needed to really support that particular teacher? Are we individualizing to make sure we're meeting that teacher's need? The form also asks us to note the cycle number that you've completed. So remember, with practice-based coaching, we talk about coaching cycles. That a cycle means that you have completed a goal setting session, a focused observation, and a debrief. You have to have all three parts to equal a cycle. And so that is what the form is measuring. It's measuring those three components in that cycle. It also asks that you list the action plan goal. How many total goals have you worked on? How many are completed or moved into a maintenance, meaning that you're not talking about that particular goal every session. You're not action planning around it every session. It doesn't mean you don't talk about it. It means that it's kind of moved to the back and we bring it up as needed. There's also a space where you can write notes, both on the paper log and on the Excel. So if there's something that happened during this cycle that you really want to remember, you may make notes here. You'll notice that the log also talks about identifying a coach by ID, a program by ID, and a teacher by ID. So same with other tools, we're never going to write teachers' names on our logs. We're never going to write the coach's name on the log. We want to make sure this data tool, just like the others we use in Pyramid Model, are anonymous. So we're not breaching the confidentiality of the teacher that we're working with. If the log had my name on it, everybody knows that I coach Jolena. So if it had my name on it, they're going to know it's her log. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that partnership, that mutual trust, by creating some sort of anonymous identification when you're completing logs. So
Denise,
this,
can you go back
yes.
just a minute? And I want to say something about this. It's
Mhm.
hard to get back there. All right. So what I wanted to say was, Denise was very clear that the cycle is the action plan goals, the observation, and the debriefing session. But you might not complete all of those on the same day, right? You might do an observation on Monday and not get to the debriefing until Thursday or Friday or something, or even sometimes we don't recommend this, but even sometimes it could be longer. But you can use that form to make sure that you've completed it. So you can use the same form, even though you're using it over 2 days. You just have to be careful about how you enter it into the Excel file. And it will help you remember that you have completed the cycle. Because one of the things that we run into is that people fail to complete a coaching cycle. They observe, but they don't really get around to doing the debriefing session.
Mhm.
So, I'm sorry, that was all.
No, that was a good point. So the log is really capturing that cycle. And I think this might be a new kind of a concept for some of our novice coaches, but a cycle is really those 3 parts. If you haven't completed those 3 parts, then your cycle is incomplete. It's not a complete coaching cycle until you have a focused observation and a debrief. Good, thank you. So this page shows the Excel workbook, and so it mirrors the form exactly. The green bar at the top, those are your observation strategies. So you enter in the cycle number, the date of the observation, and then you just go across and check the strategies that you used at that particular focused observation. On the bottom of this slide in the peach line is the debrief strategies. So same thing, what cycle number are you on, the date you completed that debrief, and then you just go across and check what specific strategies you used on that particular debrief. And when we do that, we can get graphs. So our wonderful Excel creator, Myrna Vigia, she's created this Excel that will pop out. We put in that little bit of data. It pops out these amazing graphs that we can look at across teachers or for a teacher. This graph on this current slide shows action plan. So the blue line will show you the total number of action plans you've written for a particular teacher. And then the orange bar shows you the total number of action plan goals that were completed or put on maintenance for a particular teacher. So at the end of your coaching, or if you're going into a leadership team planning meeting, a coach can pull this graph and they can show exactly what their progress is with each of the teachers that they're coaching. And then it also will show you the percent. So the slide we just looked at was the total number. You can also look at it in percent. So the percent of action plan goals that are completed or moved to maintenance for each teacher. This graph shows you the observation strategies by teacher. So you can see this coach is coaching just 2 teachers, teacher 2 and teacher T1. So teacher 2 strategies are in blue and T1 are in orange. So we can go across the x-axis, look at the different observation strategies as listed on the coaching log. And then we can see how many times we're using those per teacher. So this is a really great tool for a coach to go back and reflect. If you're struggling with a teacher, let's say, and you can't understand why they haven't started to initiate a new goal, let's go back and look at the way that we're supporting this teacher, or what kinds of strategies have we been using? Is there some strategies that we haven't used at all? Are there things that we could do differently to maybe support that teacher in a more individualized way? This graph, along with the, like we just looked at for observation strategies, this one looks at debriefing strategies across our 2 teachers that we're coaching. So we can, again, if we're having trouble connecting with a teacher, we're having trouble getting them to reflect during our debrief session, we're having trouble thinking of new goals together, think about the strategies that you're using when you're debriefing with teachers. Is there a way that you could mix it up to maybe support that teacher in a more individualized way? These 2 graphs kind of show the action plan goals and then the debriefing strategies on one page. So now we can look at the debriefing strategies that we're using. How effective are they in getting teachers to complete goals? And so we look at teacher 2, and she's completed 3 goals. Teacher T1 is also completed 3 goals. Let's look at the different strategies that we've used across teachers to see if we can support them in different ways. We can also graph and look at the duration of cycles. Is there a difference in how long we're spending during coaching cycles with each teacher? Could that be a reflection of why one teacher is meeting goals versus the other teacher not meeting as many goals? It looks like we've attempted the same amount of cycles, but when you look at the duration of their debriefing, there's a big difference in the amount of time we spend with one versus the other. Could that be a difference in their outcomes or their reaching that fidelity goal? So thinking about the data in that way, asking those kinds of questions will support your coaching to be more individualized and to be meeting teachers where they're at. Remember the teapot, or the teaching pyramid observation tool, is the measure we use to set goals in particular classrooms. The teapot measures implementation fidelity for your particular teachers. We can do, as coaches, we can do running teapots to help teachers keep on track with their implementation fidelity. We should run an end of the year teapot just to see where our teachers started and where they ended as a result of coaching. When we have good coaching data on our coaching logs, and then we can see our pre and post teapot data for a particular teacher, we can make a direct correlation about how our coaching support helped that teacher reach implementation fidelity. So making decisions, remember, it takes a team. It can't be just the coach looking at this data by themselves and thinking that they can answer all those questions. We really want the coach to be supported by their program leadership team. That team can help think about the coaching caseload. Maybe the coach is supporting more teachers than her FTE can handle, and they can't get into debrief as often. Maybe the teachers that are trying to coach are also meeting on several different other planning committees or different work groups. So leadership teams have the ability to think, okay, let's let her off this one work group so that she has more time to meet with her teacher and work on this implementation fidelity. So we really want the team to really look at this data, make good decisions around coaching, and making sure that the coach has the time and the training to support practice-based coaching in partnership with her teachers. Remember, our database decision-making cycle in pyramid, with all our pyramid tools, is we gather the information, real specific information that we think or we know will help you make the best decisions, that you have local control of that data. You can make very timely decisions around your implementation fidelity. But it's not enough just to gather it. Like Jolena said earlier, we need to sit down and look at it and analyze and ask questions around that data. Then that analysis will help you think of action plan goals. We want the team, not just the coach, but the team, to implement that plan and then evaluate to make sure we're getting the outcomes that we want to achieve. So we have developed a worksheet to go along with this data decision-making cycle, and we call it the look, think, act. So the look is the gathering, the think is the analyzing and asking questions, and then the action plan is the act. So we do have a look, think, act worksheet for the coaching log specifically. This is a really great tool if you're having, if you're at a leadership team meeting and you're not sure what to think about this coaching log and why and what can it do for us and what questions should we ask. It helps kind of guide your gathering of the coaching log data. It helps you to think about particular questions around the data that you've collected, and then possible, not the end all be all, but possible action steps you may take if your data is showing you these kinds of patterns, or you're thinking about why is this happening versus why is this happening. So some possible ways that your leadership team or your coaches can make action around what the data is telling them. So other things that you want to consider, or your leadership team should consider when you're looking at coaching log data, we want to know when the coaching support happened. Is it happening the way that we outlined in our professional development plan? So we'll look at the amount of time spent in observations, how many cycles coaches have completed, and we can answer that question pretty easily. We also want to think about, are there any major changes that happened during this coaching year? And the last 2 years for coaching has just been so chaotic, and it's really stretched our coaches pretty thin. Have we had to move to virtual coaching? Are we doing coaching live or maybe over Zoom? So we want to take those things into consideration as we examine the data. Were there other initiatives that were being implemented that may have split the coaches' time so they weren't as focused on pyramid model as we thought when we wrote our first professional development action plans? Some things the coach can consider about their specific data. First, are teachers meeting goals? Are you moving action goals into maintenance with all of your teachers at the same kind of a pace or similar paces? Are you using strategies that seem to be effective for each individual teacher that you're coaching? Do your strategies look the same across the board, whether teachers are meeting goals or not? That's a really good reflective tool for coaches. Coaches should also think about, have they used their data to adjust their debrief or observation strategies? So making sure that you have access to the data on a regular basis, and you can prepare your observations or your debrief based on what the data is telling you. And then always we want to reflect on, are we making a difference in teacher practices? Are teacher practices changing? Are their TPOT scores improving because of the coaching supports that we're providing? So look, think, act. We want to make sure that we're always looking at the data. We're always on a regular and ongoing basis thinking about the data. We want to look at the coaching cycles that we're completing. Are we getting through each of those components, the goal planning, the focused observation, and a debrief session? So all three components to complete a cycle with our teachers that we're coaching. What's the duration? How long are we spending with each teacher? Are there patterns of strategies that we're using or not using? I know for me, this was really eye-opening when I first looked at my coaching data with a log in this way. Modeling was something that I never used. I never, I guess, had the confidence in myself to ask to do it. But there was obviously teachers that would have benefited from me going in there and giving a try for them first, letting them watch me So looking at your strategies and making adjustments based on what those strategies are, and then thinking about your action plan goals that are completed and are teachers making the progress that you want them to make. So thinking about maybe I've set too many goals for this teacher, or maybe there's different goals that were a priority for her that we just haven't gotten to yet, and she's losing interest or she's losing buy-in. So thinking about those questions and that data in that way will really help you build action steps that are going to be really comprehensive, give you a lot of bang for your buck, and think about how we can get teachers to changing those practice in a more fluid way.
Okay, so this is our example, and I see that we're getting really close to the end. So I'm hoping the example is simple enough for us to be able to get through. You heard Denise at the beginning talk about how the coach needed a goal or a plan. And so when you're thinking about the teachers and the coach in this example, think about the coaching plan. In this example, Miss Rita is the coach, and she's been coaching for approximately 6 months, which means that they started it in August and are, have been really in the same school year coaching. She's been coaching throughout that school year. The plan in her program is to coach all of the teachers exactly the same, which means that Miss Rita is supposed to meet with each teacher and complete a coaching cycle every 2 weeks. You can see from our example, though, that the teachers aren't the same. Teacher A is a brand new teacher. She's excited about coaching and has initial low rates of implementation. So when they started the year, it makes sense. She's a new teacher. She didn't have as many of the practices. She wasn't implementing them. And so that's a different teacher than teacher B. Teacher B is a veteran. She's new to coaching, and so she's a little bit reluctant. We've all had those teachers. And she initially had high levels of implementation. But remember, I told you the plan was to coach all of the teachers in the same way. So teacher A and teacher B were receiving coaching every 2 weeks. And so Miss Rita, the coach, has started to notice that there are differences that are making her uncomfortable between teacher A and teacher B's classroom. So teacher A seems to be, as we said in the beginning, she's really eager. And so she's trying out a lot of the resources. She's trying out a lot of the things that Miss Rita has talked to her about. Miss Teacher B does some of them, but she takes a lot longer to put the ideas and practices that she and the coach are reflecting on. She's taking a lot longer to put them into place. And so remember, she was reluctant. She had high implementation. So Miss Rita is kind of wondering, one of the things she's wondering is Miss Teacher B just reluctant, or am I doing something different in coaching? So what we want to do with the coaching data was try to make it simple enough so you could just see what kind of data she might look at and what kinds of questions she might ask and come to some conclusions on the look, think, act process. So what she finds, we're looking at the coaching cycles, and you can see that as you're looking at it, that there are more coaching cycles attempted and completed for teacher A than there are for teacher B. There's more time, so the 405 is the number of minutes spent with teacher A across the whole coaching for 6 months. So 405 versus 225, the time spent, the average duration for each observation is about 10 minutes difference per each observation. The total debriefing duration is different as well. And the average debriefing duration is, again, a little over 10 minutes. So Miss Rita is spending more time with teacher A. She spent twice as much time with teacher A and teacher A has more completed coaching cycles. So it looks like maybe the time spent with teacher A is really making a difference, and also that the cycles are making a difference. Here's our strategies or patterns of strategies across the observation sessions in a graphic form. You see that for teacher A, Miss Rita has a lot of different strategies that she's using. For teacher B, the biggest strategy that she's using is just observing during the observation session, and she's collecting data. So she's doing a couple of other things, but mostly she's just observing and collecting data. But with teacher A, she's doing a lot of things. She's videotaped some of the sessions. She's giving verbal support. She's doing side-by-side gestural. She's having a lot of reflective conversations with teacher A, short reflections because they're during the observation sessions, but not so many with not any with teacher B. Here are these observation strategies in a table form, so you can look at it for those of you who are interested or have better luck looking at tables than graphs. This is another way to do it. It's the same data that I showed you on the graph. And so when Ms. Rita is thinking about the data, she sees that she's using a variety of observation strategies with teacher A, and she's taken opportunity to do a bunch of other stuff with teacher A. Whereas with teacher B, she's doing a limited number of strategies. So not as much time, not as many strategies. And we see the same thing repeated in the debriefing session. So Ms. Rita with teacher B is doing about 30% reflective conversations, about 35% supportive feedback, which means she's telling her what a good job or where she's doing a good job. A little bit of time, about 15% in goal setting, but she's not helping with environmental arrangements. She's not doing role play or modeling. She's especially not, you'll see the difference between teacher A and B, giving teacher B constructive feedback. All right. So she's really wondering what is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at the time. So we're really late. Let me go through these two. Think about the data. She's wondering if she spends more time with teacher A because she has a better relationship with teacher A, right? And so when she's thinking about that, she thinks part of her plan needs to be to change that part. So how might she do that? She's looking at the number of action plan goals, and she's seeing that teacher B has more action plan goals, but has completed fewer. So that's an issue, only about 43% of her goals. And she asked herself the question, was 3 too many goals for teacher B to have at once? And is teacher B did want to target all of her areas, but maybe that was a mistake she made with her. So she's going to change the way she coaches based on those data. So she's reviewing the coaching log more often, and she's going to look at the data more often so she can change what she does with the teachers and keep track of it. But she's got different plans for teacher A and B. One is teacher A, she's going to continue the same level of support because it seems to be working for her. She's meeting goals. And when the next teapot is done, she's going to make sure that teacher A, that coaching report and action plan goals translate into a higher level of implementation of teapot practices. For teacher B, she's going to spend additional time making a stronger collaborative partnership because she's not sure about their partnership. She's going to reduce the number of goals. Teacher B seemed to have too many goals. She's going to increase coaching time so that she is actually seeing her once every 2 weeks. And she's going to make a point to include constructive feedback. I'm not going to talk about the data roadmap. Some of the other digging into data webinars have talked about it. Just know that The data roadmap provides you with information about the coaching log as well as all the other data tools that we have. Here's some resources that you can get by going to our practice-based coaching resources, and here's where they are in Pyramid Model in the Challenging Behavior website. The next digging into data is teapots and tippy toes. So I think some of you will be really interested in that. There's some references on the PowerPoint, and I believe the PowerPoint is posted, so you'll be able to look at those. And this is survey and certificate. Did you want to talk about that?
So thank you so very much to both of our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do, so please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for our upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.